Hi guys, welcome back. So in this session we will learn about what are the Salesforce developers question and answers asked in Salesforce. So first question is trigger scenario. I will explain one by one step. So first question is delete or deleted opportunity when user changes the account status active to inactive. So here there is a solution for that trigger delete deleted opportunity on an account after update and create a list of IDs for create a for loop for account and trigger.new. If trigger.oldmap.get acc.id account status from active to inactive, then get all related list of opportunity. After that you can delete that operation. Here you can refresh the code over there. So moving to next question, this when user update checkbox on account field need to check all related contact having one checkbox contact field checked. So here the solution for that trigger checkbox account on account after update. Here the list of contact to appear new list of contact for account trigger.new. If acc.checkbox is equal to true, then then create a list of contact. After that, create a for loop for the contact and update that contact over there. So third question is write a trigger on account opportunity before delete scenario. If opportunity exists on account, then restrict to delete. So trigger prevent delete opportunity on account before delete. So create a set of IDs, create a for loop for the opportunity that select ID name account ID from opportunity where account ID is trigger.old. Then for loop for account is trigger.old if IDs dot contains ACC or then add error that cannot delete account with associate opportunities. So write a trigger when an account insert then it creates two child opportunity with the same name, amount and industry also. So here the code is trigger create child opportunity on account after insert create a list of opportunity and for account trigger.new then opportunity creation of opportunity then if opportunity second time is created this is opportunity o1.clone false comma true and it's also created. Okay, you can refer this code also. So what are trigger context variables and events? Trigger context variables. So all trigger context variables are implicit variables that allow the developers to access the runtime context. So these variables are contained in the system.trigger class. Okay. So what are the types of trigger context variable is trigger dot is before, trigger dot is after, trigger dot is insert, update, is delete, is undelete, trigger dot size, trigger dot is executing, trigger dot new, trigger dot old map, trigger dot new map, and trigger dot operation enum type. So here the difference between the event before and after. So event is like insert, update, delete, and undelete. And the difference between before and after that is in insert event we can use trigger.new and after event we can use trigger.new and trigger.new map. And in update event we can use in before that trigger.new, trigger.new map, trigger.old and trigger.old map. After that in the after event we can use that trigger.new, trigger.new map, trigger.old and trigger.old map. So in the delete event also we can use for the before and after that trigger.old, trigger.old map, and in the after event that trigger.old and trigger.old map. And in the undelete events before are not executed and only after is executed that is trigger.new and trigger.new map we can use that. So what is trigger.new? It is used to get a list of all the records that after trigger activation. So trigger.new cannot be changed in after DML operations since it has already been stored. So however, if you can change it in before the DML operations and if you try to change the trigger.new in and after DML operations, you will get error like that this execution after update caused by system.final exception record is read-only. Okay. So in the trigger.old prior to the update process, this method returns a list of the old version of records. Only update and trigger delete and only update and trigger delete triggers have these features, and there are no old values in insert triggers. Okay, so coming to next dot trigger dot old map. So in the trigger.old map, prior to the update operations, that it also returns the map function from the record ID to the related record, that its map ID comma accounts, that map ID comma opportunity, that map ID comma cases, like it map the update operations, that it returns the record ID of the related record. Okay, the only update and remove trigger have this option. There are no old values in insert triggers. In the map function, that trigger.old menu only update and remove triggers have these options. Okay, and trigger.new map, that is returns a map from a record ID to the record it belongs to. That is, for instance, that map ID comma account, this map will only be a viewer once the record IDs have been filled in. So as a result, the map in the before insert trigger cannot be accessed, and after insert, before the update, after undelete triggers all support the new map context variable. So trigger dot operation type. So returns an enum of type system dot trigger operations corresponding to the current operations. Possible values of the trigger system dot trigger operations are enum before insert, before update, before delete, after insert, after update, after delete, and after delete. If you vary your programming logic based on different types trigger types, that's considered while using the switch statement with different permutations of unique trigger execution in our states. So, what are the considerations while using the trigger context variables? So, keep in mind what are the considerations while using the trigger context variable in Salesforce. So, trigger.new and trigger.old cannot be used in Apex HTML operations. So, you can use an object to change its own field values, like using trigger.new, but only in visible triggers. And in after trigger, we can use only trigger.new is not saved, so a runtime exception is thrown. Trigger.old is always a read only, and you cannot delete a trigger.new. Trigger events. So trigger events are like two types of events: before events and after events. So before events are handled by insert, update, and delete, and after events are handled by insert, update, delete, and the last one is undelete. So what is SOQL? मतलब social query, which is Salesforce Object Query Language. So here the uh, question asks in Salesforce that write a SOQL query to retrieve all accounts with at least one opportunity and contact. So here is the explanation for that. So select ID comma name comma, it's a query or subquery that select ID comma name from opportunities comma select ID comma name from contacts from account, where ID in select account ID from opportunity and ID in select account ID from contact. So here to retrieve all accounts with at least one opportunity and contacts, as you can see. So second question asks about in a SOQL query that write SOQL query to retrieve all accounts with at least one opportunity and contacts. So select. Sorry, I think uh, both question are same, but solution I think it will contradict. So in that question we actually select stage name count ID from opportunity group by stage name. Okay, thank you very much. So yeah, LWC. What is LWC? Lightning Web Components. So first question is, what is the purpose of @API, @wire, and @track? So the Lightning Web Component programming model has three decorators that add the functionality to a property or function. Okay, the ability to create a decorators is the part of ECMS script, but these three decorators are unique to Lightning Web Components. What are the three decorators? Are @API, @wire, and @track. So what is the difference between @API, @track, and @wire? So @API, it is used to expose a public property decorate with @API. So an owner component that uses the component in its markup can access the component public properties. Okay, so we can use that iterate API. So an iterate track to track the private property value and re-render a component when it changes. Decorate the property with iterate track. So track property are also called private reactive property. Suppose we use iterate track property and we want to re-render a component when the component changes. It suppose that when the data value are changes, that component is get auto refreshed. When we use the track, it re-render the component and changes, and whatever the changes you made in the UI part is automatically changes in the backend part, and it will be reflected on the screen that the new value view of changes in that UI. Okay. API, wire is to read Salesforce data, that is Lightning Web Components use a reactive wire service, and when the wire service provisions data, the component re-renders. So order of execution, suppose you have a workflow and process builder. It's getting executed and trigger as well in single transaction. Then how many times process builder and workflow gets called. So in order of execution, firstly trigger will run, then after workflow. After the workflow update, before trigger will only runs, the total count will be 3. Okay. So communication in LWC. What are the types of communications we can do in LWC? That we can do 3 types of communications, that it's parent to child relationship, child to parent, and LMS or object model. That is parent to child communication. So in parent to child communication, we can communicate from the parent component to the child component through property binding. Okay, and we can also to property binding like at the rate API decorator. Okay, so communication between parent to child components in L2C can be achieved through property binding and event tagging. So the parent component can pass the data to the child component using property binding like at the rate API, and the child component can notify the parent component of any events using custom events. So here the example of parent component that is in the HTML code, that is template C component message parent message on custom event, and C child component that is import. Here the HTML code, you can refer this. We move to the next question, that is, yeah, in the child component is the JavaScript part of the child component, that is handle click button, that is you can declare a custom new constant custom event is a new custom event, that is event detail, and we can call this component event with the parent component. Yeah, import, yeah, in this child component. Yeah, in this example code, we have an input field where the user can enter their username. The handle input change method is called on every input change, updating the username property and displaying the entered value below the input field. Okay, so here's the, yeah, here's the parent component out of HTML and child component JavaScript part. Here's the child component of that JavaScript part. Yeah, child to parent. As we have seen, passing a public property from the parent and receiving it from child, it's an easy way of to achieve a parent to child relationship communication. So in this case, child to parent communication, it is bit more complicated. From child to component, from the child component will be pass the value to the parent component using custom event. So what is custom event? So custom event is a constructor have one required parameter, that is a string which refers to the event type. So in this example, when the user enters something in the lightning input field, the component creates and dispatches the custom event called getSearchValueEvent. The event includes the data in detail property. So here the child component of HTML and child component of JS. So here the child component has template s2 is child component, and he enter a search value on change handle change, and his handle change is the a child component of JS, that handle change are event this dot search key event dot target value cons search event. Here the custom event you can declare and the event dispatch. Create an event and dispatch that event in a local scene. So the parent component listens for the child gets search value event in the on get search value attribute and handle it the handle search value event handler. In handle search value, we are assigning the value from the event detail to search the value variable. In this way, we can perform parent to child communication effectively. So remember, in the above example, the components are related, but when the components are not related, through the parent-child relationship, we can perform communication using the PubSub model or LMS, that is Lightning Message Service. If the com- if the cha- if the what we can say, if the components are not related with each other, so that is not in the hierarchy of their parent-child relationship, that we can use to connect this model, that is PubSub model or LMS. So what is LMS? Lightning Message Service. So Lightning Message Service is a way to communicate or pass information between Visual Force pages, Aura, and AWC. So the catch is that the Visual Force page or Aura component must be a Lightning experience, not a Salesforce classic. So LMS allows communication to happen between that may or may not in a relationship. So basically, the LMS has two components, the message channel and the message payload. The message channel defines the communication contract between the component, while the message payload represents the data being sent between components. Okay, to use to use the Lightning Message Service, we need to create a message channel, define its properties, and publish or subscribe to that channel. Once the component publishes a message to a channel, any component that subscribes to the channel will receive the message payload. Suppose we create a message channel and the subscriber can subscribe the channel, only that message will be communicated to that particular subscribe channel. Okay. What are the limitations of Salesforce Lightning Message Service? So, Lightning Message Service does not have the capability to integrate with the Salesforce mobile app, App Actions, Lightning Out, and Lightning Communities. So, LMS doesn't work in Salesforce Classic. LMS doesn't work in iframes, and it doesn't support creating Lightning message channels directly in the Salesforce UI. What is the purpose of connected callback? In Lightning Web Components (LWC), the connected callback lifecycle hook is used to perform actions when a component is inserted into the DOM, that is document object. This hook is called after the component is connected to the DOM and after its child elements have been connected. The primary purpose of the connected callback method is to set up the initial values, perform one-type configuration tasks, or make initial requests to fetch the data. Here are some common use cases for the connected callback. That is initialization. You can use this hook to initialize the variables default value, perform any setup needed variables component is added to the DOM. That is connected callback. Data retrieval. If your component needs to fetch the data from a server or perform some asynchronous operations, you can initiate these actions in the connected callbacks. Event registration. You can register event listeners in the connected callback to handle an event that occurs when the component is inserted to the DOM. It is important to note that the connected callback is called once when the component is initially connected to the DOM. If you need to perform actions when the component update or receive new data, you might want to use the rendered callback or update callback lifecycle hooks. Here a brief overview of the key lifecycle LWC lifecycle hooks, that is connected callback, rendered callback, disconnected callback, and update callback. So connected callback invoked when the component is inserted to the DOM. Rendered callback when invoked when the component template has been rendered, then rendered callback is introduced, takes place. Disconnected callback is introduced when component the component is removed from the time, then disconnected callback is worked there, and after that the update callback invoked when the component is updated after the property or state change. Overview of Aura components in Salesforce. What are the questions asked in Salesforce? That is Aura components. That is, what is the major difference between Aura components and LWC? And second question is, why did Salesforce had come up with LWC when Aura components have been there in the industry for 6 years? So when Aura components were published, ES6 was not launched, and 6 ES6 was launched. A lot of uh, change in the JavaScript world, and browsers also matured a lot. So the major problem with the Aura components is when a new features launch. So ES6, that is enumerated JavaScript language 6, that has to be ported to the Aura components, and there it needs to be. Whereas the LWC, once an update release, straight away we can use in it is LWC. Okay, let's suppose take an example that in LWC here the upgrade has been released. So straight away where it is related to the JavaScript world, that it's automatically update real time basis in the, but in Aura components it cannot operate. Firstly it has to be ported in the ES6, ES6 model, then after that we can use that in the Aura components. Okay, but straight away we can use that in LWC also. We cannot ported that in the ES6 model. Okay, in our components we need to write Aura specific code and the platform generate native JS. So whereas in LWC we will write native JS and that will provide a significant performance boost. So what are the different component bundles in Salesforce Lighting component? So a component bundle contains a component or an app and all its related resources. That is Lightning bundle, basically a collaborative name of the following files. That is Lightning bundle, component, controller JS file, helper JS file, style file, documentation, renderer, design, SVG. Here, uh, when or a component will be created, these OR files are to be created. That is component, controller JavaScript file, helper JavaScript file, style, documentation, render, design, and SVG. These all files are created at a time when you create a Aura component, and when you create a LWC component, only three files are created. That is HTML file, JS file, and your meta.xml file. Okay, when you build Lightning component, you deal with the following component bundles. That is, component are the self-contained and reusable units of an app. File, whereas UI is representative, showcase stuff is contained primary file in the resource bundle. So a component can contain other components as well as HTML, CSS, JavaScript, or dependent enable code. So yeah, sorry, a mistake. Each action function takes in three parameters, that is component, event, and helper. That is component, that component to which the controller belongs, and the event, the event to that the action is handling, and the helper, the component helper which is optional. That is, a helper contains function that is used, can be any JavaScript code in the component bundle. So in the component, in the controller, we can call function directly from action from of component like exclaim. Uh, we can call helper function from the controller function with the helper keyword. It's a helper.js or JavaScript file code of controller can be shifted to the file. Help in making the controller easier to load in the browser. This is called lazy loading design pattern. Heavy code outside that is invoked only evoked when it called. This is the best practice. So we can this is the best practice to use helper JavaScript file in your Aura components, because it is also called the lazy loading design pattern, because it's it helps in making controller easier to load in the browser. Okay, It is auto-wired via the message via the naming convention helper.js, like my first helper.js. Here, my first app is a connected component name. The helper function calls an apex controller method and choose the action. The apex method is invoked and the data is returned. So here the my first app controller.js, my first app controller dot app helper.js. If you want to reuse function in the component, put it into a helper. That style, documentation, render, these are the difference between what is style. We can use the CSS for. In the documentation, help us to create the predefined documentation for all the components that are being developed. This is the best practice. So render is a client-side controller. It's a JavaScript business that defines the function for all of the component actions. While the component is launching in the browser, if we want to implement a different functionality or behavior at runtime, use this. So my first app render.js is the first component render of my first app that is designed as scalable vector graphics give an unique icon branding to the component. All these files are used in Lightning components to define the functionalities. What is the purpose of a design file in a component? We can give the administrator the option to set the values of the parameters using UI. So what is a component event in Salesforce Lightning component? So component events can be handled by same component or a component that instantiate or contains the component. The component events can only be registered in child component and handled by a parent component. It's the component event, child component. You can refer here. You can pause this video and read all the values which are written. Okay, child component, JS controller, parent component, lightning parent component.cmp, JS controller parent component, lightning action, and here is the output. Click here the fire event. Welcome Salesforce. What is application event Salesforce Lightning component? So application events are used when you need two independent components to communicate with each other. They don't need to be in a component hierarchy or nested within each other. Application events are handled by all components that are listening to the event. These events are essentially a traditional public subscribe model that in LWC we can use PubSub model or LMS, that is which is not in the hierarchy of the component, and same as a matter in L or components we can use application events to which is not in the hierarchy of the component. We can use that in the application event. Here the example of application event, that is how we can use notifiers.cmp in an application event. Here the JS controller of notifier controller.js handle component. The application event handled by the handle CMP that fire using Aura handler in that markup. The action attribute of Aura handler sets the client's side controller action to handle the event. Lightning component handlers.cmp, that is handler.cmp Aura components. Here the Aura component JS controller handle component.js, that is lightning application, that is action folder notification. Here we can use in the application that lightning component handle CMP in your lightning applications. Yeah. Explain how data can be passed from parent component to child component in Aura components. So data can be passed from parent component to child component using attributes. The question comes, what is an attribute? So attribute acts like a variable to store different types of values. An Aura attribute is like a variable that we use in a programming language or in an Apex class. That these are the types of field that set on a specific instance of a component. So these attribute can be used inside a component as expressions and in controller and helper as well also. Okay, so what are the types of attribute? That is basic types. These are the basic types of attribute that contain values of primitive types like integer, boolean, string, etc. That is string, boolean, decimal, integer, double, date time, long. These are the attributes we can use in your expressions and your Aura components. That is string, it stores simple text values like color, name, like this. Boolean, it can store like store variables like true or false. Decimal, it stores values with fractional part, that is price. And integer, it store integer number like values like quantity, etc. And double stores functional values like price, currency values like this. And store the date time values like and dd format, that is store the date value. Date time is store the timestamp values. And long, it store non-fraction values with wider range than integer. And B part is, that is first one is basic text, and these are the basic types on we can use in Aura component. And collection type, that is Lightning supports the collection type attribute like array, list, map. So array, an array of items of a defined type. List, an order collection of items. Map, a collection that maps keys to values. A map can't contain duplicate keys. Each key can map at to at most one value, default to an empty object. Set, a collection that contains no duplicate elements. The order for set items is not guaranteed. For example, red, green, blue might be returned as blue, green, red. Attributes of these types are typically used in hydration in Lightning to display data. C is object types. An attribute can have the type as object. The object is stored in JSON format. That is example as Aura component company type is string, that description by CRM company default Salesforce Aura components. And so basically in the above sample syntax we have an Aura attribute in which Aura attribute name is company and its type is string, and we are giving a default value as Salesforce, that is type is string, name is company, and default is Salesforce. So attributes are always declared with Aura namespace. In the attribute creation, attribute name and attribute type is mandatory properties. Apart from type, name, type, default, description, we have some attribute properties of Aura attributes such as name, type, default, access required. It is required or not possible values or default values. So what is an Apex in Salesforce? So static and non-static methods in Apex Salesforce. What is static methods? A static method is a method that belongs to the class rather than instance of a class. So they can be called directly on the class without creating an instance of a class. Okay, so static method is a method that belongs to the class that rather than and that belongs to the class that rather than an instance of the class, that because without creating the instance of a class we can use this method. Okay, they cannot reference any non-static variable or methods in the class. They are useful for performing utility functions or for performing actions that do not depend on the state of any specific object. Here is the example of a static method in Apex, that is public class my class. That is publish static integer add number integer a integer b returns a value v. In this example, add number method is declared as static and it takes two integers, that is parameters, and return their sum. So these methods can be directly on the class like this. And what is non-static methods? A non-static method is a method that belongs to an instance of a class rather than the class itself. They can be only be called on an instance of class. They can be referred both static and non-static variable and method in the class. They are useful for performing actions that depend on the state of a specific object. Here the example of non-static method in Apex, that is public class my class private integer number, that is private my class integer number, this dot number is public integer multiplier number. Okay, so in this example, multiply number method is a declarative as non-static, and it takes an integer parameter and returns the product of the integer and the number variable that belongs to the instance of a class. This method can only be the call on an instance of a class. Batch class in Salesforce. When we want to deal with a large number of records, we go for a batch effects. So the code inside the batch class runs asynchronously, that is in future context, that is the governor limit are also more compared to the synchronous code. The batch class also runs as a asynchronously. Okay, when you want to deal with a large number of records, let's suppose you have 50,000 records, and we use the batch effects class to remove the, that is to avoid the governor limits. This batch apex terminology. There is a common limit on the total number of records retrieved by a SOQL query, that we can only retrieve 50,000 records, but if we want to retrieve the more than 50,000 records, so batch apex come in a savior, that using batch apex we can process records in a batches asynchronously, and each execution of a batch apex job is considered as a your discrete transaction. Like it's contain a batch size of 200 200 200. So what, suppose we have to process 1000 records, the batch size will be 5, so it's process 200 records as a chunks of records. So when we use batch apex, we implement the database.batchable interface. So the database.batchable contains three methods we notify inside the batch class, that is start, execute, and finish method. Okay. So here in this picture, that start method is executed, that is job submitted, and it will be queued, that job 1 job 2 that it will queued as a two batch size of 200 records, that is uh, chunks of records, that is 5 200 200 200. It's a job anthem, and after that its preparing start method is invoked and processing chunks are created, and it process the record, that is success, partially success, aborted, failure, and failed. It's will be the output of your batch records of your batch what are being processed. Okay, so start method. So this method is called once at the beginning of the batch job, and it returns either a database.query locator object or an attribute that contains the record or object passed to the job. And in the execute method, it's called for each batch of record, and execute method is called after the start method. It receive a list of record which can be processed as required. Suppose you have 1000 records and here 5 batches. So start method in the execute method for each it after the start method processed, that it goes to the execute method, and execute method process as the default passage is 200, and it can be processed as a chunks of records. The default batch size is 200 records, and batches of records are not guaranteed to execute in the order they are received from the start method. It is not guaranteed that to execute in the order that they are received from the start methods. It can be uh, like what we say that in in the in order form. That it's not the ordered list, the in order list. And in the finish method, the finish method is called after all purchase or process. Use this method to send confirmation email or execute post-processing operation. Syntax. That is, what are the syntax of your batch apex? That is global class batch implements database for batchable as object. That is global database.query locator iterable start method. And here the syntax of the start method, that is database dot batchable context we see. Query an object will return the database or query located at query global void execute and global void finish. Asynchronous apex feature method. A feature method runs in the background asynchronously. You can call a feature method for executing long operations such as callouts to external web services or any operation you would like to run in its own thread on its own time. Okay. You can also use feature method to isolate daemon operations on different as object type to prevent the mixed daemon error. That is, each feature method is queued and executes when the system resources becomes available. So that way the execution of your code doesn't have to wait for the completion of a long-running operations. A benefit of using feature methods is that your governor limits are higher such that SOQL query limit and heap size limit that we can use our feature method. That's the role come here. So that is a regular apex transition that the process A, it waits for the response and completed, then after that process B will be started. But in future it's run asynchronously, that it's process A continuously working, then after that it immediately transfer to the process B, and process B also get immediately working and it get response from there. So it works as asynchronously and it works as a synchronously. The above image depicting the difference in threading processing between Apex normal transaction and future method. The speciality of the future method is that it executes when the resources are available and does not overhead on the servers. That is the reason for the execution of the code and does not have to wait for the completion of a long running operations. And also we can get your governor limits when we use our asynchronous Apex. Okay. Here the syntax of your global class feature class, that is at the rate feature public static void my feature method. What is database.stateful? So database.stateful is a marker interface to help in maintaining state across transactions. When using database.stateful, only instance member variables retain their values between transactions. So static member values don't retain their values and relation between transactions. Maintaining state is useful for counting or summarizing records they are processed. For example, we will be updating contact records in our batch job and want to keep track of the total record affected so that we can include it in the notification email. Okay, so that the role database stateful comes here. Difference between future and Queueable effects. So future, it is a annotation based. So we can use the same apex class to write the future methods as there is syntaxes at the rate future, and we cannot monitor the jobs in future, but we can monitor the jobs in your Queueable Apex. And in the Queueable Apex, it is class which implements Queueable interface. That is syntax is public class name implements Queueable. We cannot call the feature from another feature or batch job. The limit of feature method for a single Apex transaction is 50, and we can change the Queueable jobs and the stack depth in developer or is 5, and in enterprise edition you can change job as a 50. So future methods support only primitive data types, but Queueable supports primitive as well as non-primitive data types. What are platform events in Salesforce? So platform events in Salesforce are the events is used to deliver notification within Salesforce or external app. It is based on event-driven architecture. Platform events are helpful to overcome with point-to-point Salesforce integration challenges. So, in other words, platform events simplify the process of communicating changes and responding to events. That is, platform events can be used to overcome Salesforce governor limits. What are the platform events terminology in Salesforce? Here is some terminology we should remember, that is event, a change in the state that is meaning in a business process. Event message notification, that is a message that contains data about the event. Event produces the proposal of an event message over a channel. And a channel, a quantity in which an event producer transmits a message. Event consumers subscribe to the channel to receive messages, also referred to as event bus in Salesforce. Event consumer, a subscriber to a channel that receive messages from the channel. Understanding of platform event. Let's understand the platform event in detail. Set to as object like Salesforce entity suffix with an underscore underscore e replay ID for replaying the specific event only checkbox. Date time, number, text area field available in platform event. Pop-up based communication, no polling required, heterogeneous payloads, and defined events with different payloads. Difference between as object and platform events. What are as objects like daemon, insert, update, and delete, SOQL triggers, parallel constant execution, and platform events is publish, insert only, streaming API, subscribers guaranteed order of execution. When to use platform events in Salesforce? Overcome Salesforce common limits using platform events that mix TML operations, too many executable, what makes too many DML statements, too many SOQL queries, mixed DML operations. That is, these are the overcome of Salesforce common limit using platform. We can overcome this by using your platform events, that is CPU timeout. Salesforce common limits are there for a reason, but even when you employ best practices or you may still exceed them, a good developer will look at all the tools available on the platform and find the best approach to solving the problem that they are facing. Like, to overcome your mixed DML, too many DML statement, too many SQL queries, CPU timeout. So we can take care of your platform events that will overcome your issues. So platform events considerations. Platform events is appended with underscore e suffix for API name for the event. You cannot query platform event through SOQL and SOSL. You cannot use platform in reports, list view, search, and platform event don't have an associated tag. Published platform event can't be rolled back. All platform events fields are read only by default. Only after insert trigger are supported, you can accept platform event both API and declaratively. You can control platform events through profile and permissions. Trigger events. What is trigger event? That is before and after insert, update, delete, insert, update, delete, and undelete. Type of exceptions in Salesforce. Here, the different type of exceptions in Salesforce, that is required field missing, mixed HTML operation error, invalid data, system.out final exception, record is 2.1 is record is read-only, list exception, null pointer exception, query exception, no rows for assignment, system.query exception, non-selective query against large object type, as object exception, limit exception, too many queries 101, too many DML operation statements 151, epic CPU time, limit exceeds too many query rows, string exception, JSON exception, apex type unsupported in JSON, object unexpected exception, flow exception. DML exception, that is required field missing. It throw the DML system.dml exception insert field first exception on row 0, that is required field missing. That is that, let's suppose in the contact count, this is new contact first name is away, insert count and catch D1 include. So in this scenario, it returns a required field missing error, that is required field missing on first exception on row 0, error required field missing, because in Salesforce for the contact object last name is a required field and you didn't include that the last name in that scenario, so it says a required field are missing. So include all. What are the solution for the DML exception is include all required field before performing DML events. Mixed DML operation error. A mixed DML operation error comes when you try to perform DML operations on a net setup on a non-setup objects in a single transaction. Okay, it will give you the system.find DML exception insertion field first exception on row 0 first error mixed DML operation error. How to fix your mixed DML operation error? So we should perform DML operation on standard custom object records in a different transaction. So let's see how to avoid mixed ML operation error. So firstly, use future method helps in avoiding mixed ML errors. So mixed DML operation in test method, that is mixed DML operation, that is system dot run as a blocks, and use the rate feature to bypass the mixed DML error in the test method also. Invalid data. System.dml exception inserts a failed first error on row 0 with ID. First error invalid field for insert update cannot specify ID on an insert call. ID. This issue comes while inserting a same record in trigger, so don't include ID while inserting the record. Since final exception record is read only, system.find record is read error comes when you are trying to edit a trigger.new record in an after update after insert. So the record are read only in that context as they have been written but not committed to the database. So update record in before event or query record before updating it from database. List exception. Any problem with a list, such as attempting to access an index that is out of bound, will throw system.list exception, that is list exception out of bound exception, that is like try list of accounts, select ID from account where name is equal to API. System.debug is netna and it use size function to avoid the list of if the error come, use size function to avoid the list out of bound issue. Null pointer exception. Any problem with dereferencing null, such as in the following code, that is string as boolean b as contains.rb, and it will throw the null pointer exception attempt to design null pointer error because the allocate memory assigned value before using the object. Query exception. Any problem with SOQL queries, such as assigning a query that returns no record or more record, one record to a single S object variable. So here example of system.query exception list has no rows for assignment to X object, that is account A, select name ID from where XYZ limit 1. Use list to avoid the issue. System.query exception. If you query records on an object returns at 2 lakh records, sorry 20 2 lakh records, and without query filters, it's possible to receive an error. So non-selective query against large object type. As object exception, as object rows were retrieved via SOQL without querying. So include all field in your SOQL query. So we didn't get your that is required by as object rows were retrieved by SOQL query. Limit exception. In Salesforce, we can encounter the Salesforce common limits. Our common limit has been extended. This exception can't be caught. This is a hard limit, means you can't increase it by contacting Salesforce support. Here some common list exceptions are too many SQL queries 101. This means you can only have up to 100 SQL query in a single context. This is a hard limit, which means you can't increase it by contacting Salesforce support. Here example trigger.me for contact at contact ID. Too many DML statement from 51. So what you need to do is, if you need to create a list of all the record and insert that list using DML statement, in this way you can insert multiple records only in one DML statement. That is, here you can insert account A in the update ACC node. That you can not do like this. Apex CPU time limit exceeds. CPU time limit uses 10 seconds for synchronous transaction and 60 seconds for your asynchronous processing. Apex CPU time limit exceeds error means your transactions taking too long can't be completed. Too many query rows. You will get a limit exception. Too many query rows 5001 error when you query with data more than 50,000 records. So solution is use limit and filter in your SQL query. String exception. Any problem with string, such as string that is exceeding your heap size. So here is example of a system.string exception invalid ID. Solution isn't valid ID, use null instead. JSON exception. Any problem with JSON serialization or deserialization operations. For more information, they see the method that is system.json and system.json parser and system.json generator. So Apex type unsupported in JSON object, that is JSON.deserialize string type method cannot deserialize from JSON into generic object or into object with generic object. Use wrapper class to deserialize the JSON. And in unexpected exception, a non-recoverable internal error within Salesforce has occurred. This exception causes execution to halt. If necessary, contact Salesforce customer support for your information. So, solution is system.unexpected exception is usually followed by a error message. Code should handle the condition that can cause this exception is to prevent it in advance but cannot be handled once it is being generated. Error message is usually self-destructive, but if it has a Salesforce error code, please contact a Salesforce.com support. Integration in Salesforce. REST versus SOAP API. REST API relies on REST architecture using HTTP and Cirrus relies on SOAP protocol. It transports data in JSON and XML, and it transports data only in XML in the SOAP API. Less structure, less bulky data, and in SOAP API highly structured and typed. Works well with JavaScript, and in SOAP API it handles large data loads. Designed with mobile devices in mind and designed with large enterprises application in mind. What is the difference between HTTP method and description? What are the difference? What are HTTP methods in Salesforce? What are there are four types of HTTP method, that is get, post, delete, put. The get method is used to retrieve data identified by a URL. Post is create a resource or post data to the server. Delete a resource identified by the URL, and create or replace a resource. Send the request to your body. Integration process from scratch. There are 8 phases of integration, that is kickoff, dynamic. After the kickoff, it goes to the dynamic define phase, and in the requirement phase, that is test, integrate, build, and design. After that, it goes to the train, deploy, and support. The phase 1 kickoff. To begin your Salesforce to ERP integration projects, that is identify your stakeholders or their roles. So some of your key questions are that at each stage, what is the portion data focus between Salesforce and ERP? How do the data models of both systems compare? What fields touch each other leverage? Phase 2, define your requirements. Phase 3, define your design phase. Phase 4, you build your applications. Phase 5 is a test. Phase 6 is a train. Phase 7 is deployment your production. Phase 8 is your support. And okay, what are remote site settings? Remote settings are used to authorize the endpoint and allow us to integrate. Here, a comparison table between name credential and remote site settings in Salesforce. What to expect? Name credentials, remote site setting, purpose configuration, and authentication. What is the purpose? Securely mode external service credential for authentication, and remote site settings allow external websites to access Salesforce resources securely. Configuration through the Salesforce setup UI or API through the Salesforce setup UI only. Authentication supports or 2.0 JWT and custom authentication methods. Does not support authentication method, only store the URL of the remote site. Uses granularity of control security used in Apex code, and some declarative automation tools can define different credential for different services, and user provide additional security and external service authentication using Apex on a Visual Force page. Overall, both name condition and remote site tracing help us to secure and manage external connection to Salesforce. Name credentials are typically used for authentication to external services, while remote settings are used to control to Salesforce resources from external websites. So this is all about. Thank you so much. Please hit like and subscribe my channel. Thank you guys.